is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Hello?
Hello, Michael.
Yes.
This is Jason with the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. You're live on the air. You're here with me, and actually we have co-host Court Bolton with us today. Jim's off doing some business he had to take care of and couldn't make it to the show, but welcome back to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's such a pleasure to be back with you guys, and there's certainly a lot to talk about.
Oh, man, it's the country is catching fire, it seems. Well, let me give you a proper introduction here, and I'm going to kind of leave this to you a little bit, because you're Michael Snyder. You're an author. You've written the book, The Beginning of the End. You run the Economic Collapse blog. You're CEO and bottle washer, all in one there, I do believe, and you know, even on your bio, you say that it's kind of hard to really categorize you, and that you are who you are. So I'm going to kind of let you give us more of an, for our new listeners, and we're on a lot more networks now than we were when we previously talked to you. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you're doing there?
Oh, absolutely. You know, a lot of people, they see my name all over the internet because my articles are not just on the Economic Collapse blog, and End of the American Dream is my other primary website, but my articles get picked up, and people see them on InfoWars, on Zero Hedge, on dozens of other websites all over the internet. On other websites take my articles for free and spread them all over the place, so people see my name everywhere, and they're like, who in the world is this guy? You know, well, I don't belong to any political organization, no organization with any agenda whatsoever. I'm just an average guy. And before I did this, before I was doing these websites, I actually worked as an attorney back in Washington, D.C. If people are familiar with K Street, that's kind of the real famous street where all the lawyers and lobbyists are, kind of the belly of the beast. You know, a lot of people, you know, don't like it, but that's where I worked back in the old days. And I got up every morning and I cut the metro into D.C. I lived, across the river in Virginia, and I every day I just got up, got on the metro, went into work, and becoming just very distressed about the direction of this country, where we were headed. I was seeing around me. I was like, what in the world can I do? I'm just an average schmo getting up, going to work, getting a paycheck. How in the world can I make a difference? Well, I heard about this thing called blogging, and people were starting to write, and I thought, well, let me see what I can do. So I started out, and at first, very, very few people took notice of what I was doing, but I stuck with it, and eventually it built, and today, the economiccollapseblog.com alone gets over 1 million page views per month, and so this massive audience. And beyond that, my articles are actually seen far more on other websites like InfoWars, Zero Hedge, et cetera, than on my website. So the audience that has been built for my articles over time is extraordinary. It blows me away to this day. But it's just the power of a average person taking action, which we can all do, and that's why we're all needed to do this in order to make a difference in this country, because there's only so much one person like me can do, but if all of us working together, we can have an enormous impact on our society if we're just willing to consistently take action.
Absolutely. I mean, it is. I see your work everywhere. It really does get syndicated out, and just it's everywhere. All these different websites, Daily Sheeple, you name it. It seems like every day I'm running across a couple of your articles, and part of that you're putting out great work. So people want it. There's just this yearning for truth, and it is amazing. You know, our radio show's only been around for just under a year, and the growth we've seen. We're on 4 different networks now. I was just on Classic Redneck Radio. I was telling my wife this morning after I got off doing a morning radio show, you know, that literally was out coast to coast to hundreds and hundreds of terrestrial radio stations. It blows me away that, you know, what I started here, where I share a room with my middle daughter, where I've got an office set up, and it's part of her bedroom too. It's one of the bigger rooms in the house, so we share it together. But I'm putting out this broadcast that, you know, is heard by thousands and thousands of people, you know, just doing it right here. And I'm just an average guy too. You know, I'm just some guy who decided this is what we need to do. And I think you're absolutely right on that. Each and every one of us has a part to play in this, and the more people we get active and involved and believing that they can really make a difference themselves, the better off we are. And boy, we need to look at doing that, because man, things are just going crazy. Let's talk about what's happening over in Baltimore. A lot of your articles today and recently have been about what's happening there at the riots. Give us your thoughts as to what's happening there and why it's important to us.
Well, you know, I'm kind of disturbed by what I'm seeing in Baltimore on a number of levels. First of all, you know, we are seeing a lot of rioting, a lot of looting, people taking advantage of the situation. And, you know, just like we saw in Ferguson, that there are people that are ready at the drop of a hat just to go crazy, to loot, to riot, to steal things from people. It's just crime, but they're using the excuse of these protests, of this anger, to go ahead and commit the kind of crimes that they already want to commit. They just need the opportunity. So there's definitely that aspect of it, and I think it's eventually going to come to more cities in America, although I specifically, back on April 11th, I gave a talk in which I publicly went on the record. I had it on my slide in the talk. I said Baltimore is one of the cities where civil unrest and rioting is coming to in America. That was about a week before Freddie Gray ever died, ever was arrested by police, before any of this started. But I went on the record saying Baltimore. And so
why did you pick Baltimore? What red flag was going up? What was the ping on your radar that was making you think something might happen there?
Well, for decades, Baltimore has been a kind of a cauldron of poverty, of drugs, of crime, of gang activity. So it's one of those kind of cauldrons where things have been bubbling under the surface, which could erupt at any moment. And so we've got this area, and then we have the incident with Freddie Gray, and the anger over that was very real. But then what we've seen is, you know, all kinds of opportunists and politicians and big names in the civil rights movements come in. And then it appears to me, and I'd be interested to hear what other people think about this as well, but it appears to me that this incident kind of was hyped up, stirred up, and that it's being used for other purposes. That for example, we're just learning today that on Monday, you know, of course, we all heard about this social media campaign that went out about this purge, and it was being hyped up. Okay, gather at this one mall for this purge. And for high school students in particular, to kind of start these riots. Well, what happened, we're learning today, is that when the schools were let out, the children were not actually allowed to go on the buses and trains and disperse and go home. But actually police were stopping buses and forcing riders to get off right at this mall area where the purge was supposed to take place. And the trains were not allowed to leave, and all these students were kind of herded into
Why would they do
one
that?
area around this mall.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just out loud wondering why would they? What would be the purpose in doing that?
Well, it appears to me that they wanted, because at first, according to teachers at these high schools, there seemed to be very little interest in any students wanting to be involved in this purge. But the reason they kind of herded them all into this one area around this mall is because they were going to get their purge one way or another to kind of get things started. And so they herded all these students into this area, and then the police were there in SWAT outfits, and they were ready for a confrontation. They start marching toward the students, and the students are like, "What's going on?" And so they and then the students start getting angry. It's like, well, we're just trying to go home, and so it sparked things. It got things going. And then once they got the riots going and people throwing rocks at the police and people kind of going into these stores and looting them, well, what happened is we're also getting reports that Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake of Baltimore actually ordered the police to stand down as the riots began. And so they were allowed to kind of go for several hours before finally, later in the evening, a state of emergency was declared. But the police, after initially kind of roiling things up, were kind of held back, and things were allowed to kind of play out there, which was very, very kind of disturbing as well. And then another thing that kind of very much disturbs me is that, well, of course, we had the decision was made ahead of time to set a curfew on Tuesday night, but not on Monday night. So Monday night was kind of free for people to go crazy. And then the other thing that really kind of gets me is we saw on Saturday night there were police vehicles kind of right in the area where all the riots and protests were taking place. They were conveniently parked along the sides of the streets, right where in the middle of everything. The police the police that they belonged to were nowhere to be seen, and so they were set on fire, they were smashed, et cetera, et cetera. That was Saturday night. Then on Monday, as these riots kind of spiraled out of control, there were even more police vehicles, police vans, conveniently parked in these areas right in the middle of the riot zone. No police to be seen anywhere around them, but right along the side of the street, very convenient for protesters to smash them, set them on fire, do whatever they wanted to do with them. No police ever seemed to intervene, and so we had these great pictures and great television which went all over the world of these police vehicles on fire. But it just seems very suspicious to me.
Boy, it sure seems like that is being engineered, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I just wrote an article about this entitled 12 Unanswered Questions About the Baltimore Riots That They Don't Want Us to Ask. And, of course, the anger over the Freddie Gray incident is very real, and and so it was a very real situation, but, like Rahm Emanuel used to say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so I think that's perhaps what we're seeing here, where they had this crisis, this incident, and they said, okay, let's really stir things up, let's get things to the boiling point, and really, make a good show of this.
Well, I certainly think that they are pushing us towards this with the training that the police are having. Obviously, there's something endemically going on across the country now. I've got a lot of friends that are law enforcement, previous law enforcement, that are some of the best people I know. But there seems to be a very real disconnect happening, and I assume it is from the training level, where police seem no longer to be trying to de-escalate situations, but are immediately escalating situations to where they're harming citizens, they're killing citizens. It really is to the point where I if my daughter were to get arrested, I would fear a bit for her safety. Which unfortunately is a shame. You would think if you're brought into custody, you would at least be safe. But that seems that there's something going on, and it's a natural progression for people to want to voice out against what's happening with this police brutality.
And I totally agree with you. And I've been writing about the police brutality and the Big Brother police state that's emerging in this country for many years. We have a massive problem with police brutality. One of the reasons for this is we have all these soldiers that went over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they acted, in many instances very brutally over there as they dealt with people, and we thought, well, that's over there. It's never going to come back over here. Well, what's happened is a lot of these troops from Afghanistan and Iraq, where they, were basically enforcing kind of a form of martial law, they've come back over here after years overseas with that same kind of mentality, and now applying the same approach here inside our own country. And then the other aspect of it is the training. As you said, police today are trained to kind of regard us as the enemy. In the old days, back in the 50s, 60s, perhaps, people in this country, they regarded police as friendly civil servants that they could go up to and ask questions, ask for their help, and that they could freely approach because there's nothing to be afraid of, at least in most instances. But today it's the total opposite of that. Everyone fears the police because they're actually trained to bark orders at people. They're trained to get overly physical. So much of this goes into how they're trained to behave. And so there's a major problem with that. We need a major cultural shift in the way that police behave. And so, there have been, and we've been reading about that over 100 incidents of police brutality in Baltimore, which have led up to this. So the anger is very real there, without a doubt. Without a doubt, we've got a major problem of police brutality in this country. We see headlines about it almost every day.
We do. Let me ask you this: have you seen this new public service announcement by AARP? Infowars did a piece on it where they boosted the audio. And it was a mother basically taking care of a child getting out of the bath or something to that effect. But it really, the story is the audio that was in the background. It was as if a TV was on in the background and there was a newscaster. And when the commercial ran, it was just audible enough that you could make out what it was, not what was being said. But if you boosted that audio channel, I know with my studio headphones that I wear for the show, I was able to actually hear the guy saying this, and they put it out there. But basically, he was talking about a martial law scenario that had been declared, and for people to find safety, and that there had been some sort of quarantine. But you got to wonder why. Obviously, that was a produced piece. They couldn't use newscasts because that hasn't happened here, and there would be copyright issues, and they would have had to have produced that. Why would they have produced that with that type of subliminal messaging? Talking about rioting and martial law and whatnot, that it seems like they're trying to get us ready for something. And my question is, do you think they're getting, we're seeing the Jade Helm 15 exercises going, and it does seem like this may be more and more a martial law training scenario, or, might even go live. Hard to know at this point what's actually going on there. But it sure is fishy. And you got to wonder what they seem to be getting us ready for. It seems like they know something is up.
Yeah, it seems very, very fishy. The commercial you're talking about was an AARP commercial. It's directed toward retired people, so it's totally out of context in terms of this message. And, in fact, I'm going to include this commercial in an article I'm working on right now that I'm going to post later today on End of the American Dream. And this is the message that was inside, and it was right in the background. So if you're watching the commercial, you wouldn't really catch it unless you listen very, very, very carefully in the background. It was kind of a news broadcast in the background of the commercial. You have to listen very carefully, but this is what the message said. Riots nationwide have prompted local governments to declare martial law. The president is asking that citizens find safety and remain calm. Authorities are working to contain the outbreak. Now, what in that world does that have to do with anything? The commercial was very calm, very peaceful. The scenes of a family, and it was directed toward retired people. That message had nothing to do with the commercial, and it was set in there in such a way as where people wouldn't hear it unless they really, really tried to listen for it. It's more of like a subliminal type of a message. Very, very bizarre. And in fact, and you mentioned Jade Helm. It's not just Jade Helm, but we're seeing all of these preparations for civil unrest training all over the nation. In fact, there was some of the National Guard in Maryland that are just going to Baltimore now. I just came across an article that said they had just been involved in civil unrest training, and that they've come back, and now that they're going to use that training in Baltimore, but they were just training for civil unrest. We've got seeing all these strange training exercises all over the nation. When you start putting the pieces together, it really starts painting a really bizarre picture.
Do you think we're going to see more riots this summer?
I think that the precedent has been set. I think it's coming. And then, of course, the response to that will be troops in our cities, SWAT teams, like we're seeing in Baltimore now. And then when these troops show up, we're saying, it's kind of a message of telling us, I think it's a conditioning where we're being conditioned to accept martial law. We saw the riot. They were allowed to continue for like the first day or so, and the police were held back. And so then we're saying, we need troops, we need martial law, we need the National Guard. They were brought in, it was a conditioning. And then the same pattern is repeated in Baltimore. I think that the anger is very real. The anger is being stirred up by the media, by our politicians, by others. And I think we will see more riots, and I think people are ready to riot. And then in turn, I think we'll see more troops in our streets, more martial law. So I think that, I think this pattern is going to continue and only going to get a lot worse.
Court, do you have any question you want to jump in with? So I've been kind of hogging the mic here, and you just got to kind of jump in when we've got guests here.
No problem. No. I was wondering along those same lines. I've been thinking a lot of the same thing, and everything that I see is pointing in the same direction as what he's talking about. I'm wondering a lot of the same things. Now, I would have some questions about some other things, and one of the big questions that I have is, why do you think that this country, as a nation, is being so divided along racial lines, along socioeconomic lines, every possible means? They are dividing this society as best that they possibly can.
Yeah, I think it goes to divide and conquer strategy. If we're not united, we're easier to bring down. We're easier to get under, to oppress. It's easier for them to do the things that they want to do. If we're all fighting with one another, if we're all hating with one another, and that's one of the most disturbing things to me about this whole thing that's happening in Baltimore is that. So many people are going on social media saying, I hate this group, I hate that group, or these people are to blame, these other people are to blame. And so it's this us versus them philosophy that I'm seeing coming from all quarters is very, very disturbing. And the American people are, like you said, we're being divided along racial lines, we're being divided along gender lines, we're being divided along red versus blue, political lines. We're being divided in just about every way you can imagine over so many things, over so many issues. And there's so much hatred, there's so much anger, there's so much frustration. And I think this is how the elite like it. That makes their job a lot easier when we're hating one another, when we're arguing with one another, when we're deeply, deeply divided. And, of course, the media is just fueling this. They're constantly talking about black versus white. They're talking about rich versus poor. They're talking, about us versus them. And so the media and our politicians are fueling it, and other national leaders and so forth and so on. So it's coming from all sides, and it's not good. What we need, what we should endeavor to be is a people of great love. And I'm a Christian. I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, and my approach is that we should all love one another, that every person is of immense value, that we need to come together, try to find solutions that work for everyone, and love and respect and honor one another. But instead in this nation we are seeing the exact opposite of that, and I think it's going to get a lot worse.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the economy too, because as all this is happening in Baltimore and the Jade Helm states, it sure is a good distraction for what's happening as far elsewhere in the country, whether that's the open borders on the south or the economy. Now we've got a new report showing that economic growth is slowed to 0.2%, grinding nearly to a halt. Now this is the cooked numbers, I believe, that they use to say how good we're doing. And if it's that bad on the cooked books, how bad is it really? I mean, I know I spent $60 on 2 bags of groceries last week. Now, there was some steak and some organic stuff and, organic gallon of milk and whatnot, but still, 2 bags of groceries was close to $60. And, I know that my dollar is going much, I can't buy nearly as much. And I think we're all beginning to feel that. What do you got going on as far as what's happening in the economy?
Yeah, if you, the new number just came out of the first quarter 2015, GDP growth of 0.2%, kind of suspicious, barely above zero. But if you go to shadowstats.com, John Wayne did a great job of publishing honest numbers, and the honest numbers show that the U.S. economy never left the last recession. It's actually been contracting for almost a decade, if you look at the honest numbers. But let's talk about the official numbers. Okay, GDP growth of just 0.2%, that's basically stall speed, just barely above a recession. But if you look inside the numbers, they're even worse, because there was, as part of the GDP in the first quarter, there was this massive inventory buildup, and which boosted GDP by nearly 3.0%. In other words, if you take that out, this massive inventory build, which, because the economy is slowing down, is going to have to be sold off and liquidated later on at much lower prices. If you take that unusual inventory buildup out, the GDP in the first quarter would have been negative 2.5%, which had been solidly in recession territory, and so that's very, very troubling. But we're seeing trouble signs all over the place. We learned this week that only 37% of all Americans with student loans are current and reducing their balances, paying their balances off on time. Only 37%. We learned this week that 1 out of every 5 American families, 19.9%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1 out of every 5 American families do not have a single person working. They tell us that unemployment is low, but if 1 out of every 5 families doesn't have anyone working at all, how in the world can we have unemployment that's down in around 5%? It doesn't make sense. If 20% of families have no one that's working, we just learned this week as well that the home ownership rate in this country hit a 29-year low, the lowest it's been in 29%. It's kept falling. Of course, during the last recession, the home ownership rate fell as the middle class struggled. People lost their homes, couldn't afford to buy homes. The home ownership rate fell. But then the recession ended. But a funny thing happened. The home ownership rate continued to fall, has continued to fall to the present day until, like I said, now it's hit a 29-year low, lowest it's been in 29 years. So we're seeing all these warning signs that things are getting worse in the economy, and I believe that we're on the precipice of the next major economic downturn.
And what will that look like? I mean, if that comes here shortly, and it sure seems like this is just so unsustainable. I mean, we can't keep. I know I can't run my household the way that the U.S. government is running its finances. It sure seems like we're running out of time very quickly, and that we may indeed see a financial collapse. Now, a few years ago, I said that probably wouldn't have been true, but now it sure seems like this can't keep going. And it certainly seems like it can't keep going for much longer. I know that our economy was just this massive beast to begin with, and it takes a lot to bring it down. But what would that look like if we were to see a collapse of our financial system? Do you think that's an actual possibility?
Oh, I absolutely do. I believe that we're headed for another major financial crisis. I believe that it's going to look even worse than what we saw in 2008. So you remember what happened in 2008 when the financial bubble burst, and all of a sudden there's all kinds of fear and panic, and the flow of money and credit and people being able to borrow for the things they need, like a home or a car, whatever, that started to freeze up, and our entire system depends on the flow of this debt, of credit, to buy a car, to go to school, to get a home, anything. People need to borrow money. And so if they can't do that, that creates a major, major problem. So what's at the heart of this lending system, this borrowing system? It's the too big to fail banks. After the last crisis, we were told, oh, we're going to fix our politicians promised us. They said, we're going to fix the problem of too big to fail. And so they said, we're going to do something about that. But instead, nothing was done at all. In fact, the four largest banks in the country have collectively gotten 40% larger since the last crisis. Meanwhile, 1,400 smaller banks have completely disappeared from the system. So we're more dependent on these too big to fail banks than ever before. And at this point, they account for approximately 67% of all assets in our financial system. So these 6 banks are absolutely critical that they do not fail, that they continue to operate normally. Now, did these big banks learn their lesson from the last time? No, they've become even more reckless since the last crisis. And a word that your listeners can listen for this next financial crisis that's coming is the word derivatives. And what derivatives are, they can be very complicated, very convoluted, but at their heart, they're essentially just wagers. They're bets about something that will or will not happen in the future. For example, if I went to Las Vegas and bet that the Chicago Cubs would win the World Series this year, I'm making a bet. Either it will happen or it won't happen. Either I'm going to win or I'm going to lose. I'm not actually investing in anything. At their heart, that's essentially what derivatives are. And we've got these 5 out of the 6 too big to fail banks have exposure to derivatives of at least $38 trillion. And the 5 banks I'm talking about are J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley. And these banks have been exceedingly reckless, gambling like crazy, transformed Wall Street into the biggest casino in the history of the world. And let me give you an idea of how reckless they've been. For example, you look at J.P. Morgan Chase, the biggest bank in America. They've got total assets of about $2.6 trillion, but they've got exposure to these derivatives, to these bets of more than $63 trillion. So they could, if those bets start going bad, they could potentially be wiped out very, very rapidly. So these banks are constantly walking a high wire act, and I believe that we're moving toward the time when this bubble is going to burst, and we're going to see a crisis like 2008, but much, much worse.
So what would that crisis look like to the average citizen? The person like you or me that may work a regular job, may still have their job, supporting their family, not on government benefits, trying their best to keep their head above water. How is their life going to be impacted by something like that?
Well, for the average person, they're going to start hearing about credit crunch and the flow of money and credit freezing up. And then if they, work someplace or they own a business, they're going to start to see, okay, no one's coming in, no one's, buying anything from my business. Our business is way down. Happened quite quickly. And then as a result, business slowdown, economic activity grinding to a standstill, then we're going to see businesses start to fail. We're going to start to see lots and lots of people lose their jobs, just like during the last crisis, but it's going to get even worse eventually. And so, last time what happened? Millions of people started to lose their jobs. Then people are living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, more than half the country. People can't pay their mortgage. They're going to start to lose their homes. So we're going to start to see foreclosures, people losing their homes, going from a middle-class lifestyle to essentially being out on the street very, very rapidly, just like the last time. So that's why, one of the things I tell average people, and just, people concerned about getting up, feeding their family, paying the mortgage, doing the basic things, is you need an emergency fund. You need something to fall back on. So when this crisis hits, you're not going paycheck to paycheck and you're just wiped out in just a matter of a month or two. You need to have some cushion to fall back on, so that you can be able to handle, a sudden downturn.
Absolutely. Well, what else is on your radar? What you've kind of got your finger on the pulse. What are the big blips you're watching other than the riots going on in Baltimore? We can talk more about Jade Helm, but what has got your attention as of the last week?
Sure. something that's very interesting to me is this J.P. Morgan accumulation of gold and silver, particularly silver. You know, I don't know if people don't realize this. We already talked about J.P. Morgan Chase. And since the beginning of, they're the biggest bank in America, but since the beginning of 2012, since that year started, the amount of silver, physical silver that they've accumulated has gone from 5 million ounces to 55 million ounces. Which, you know, why are they accumulating so much silver? You know, and actually the price of silver has fallen lately. So far their investment has not paid off. Now, you know, but under what circumstances would such a massive investment in silver pay off in a huge way? Well, if there was a massive financial crisis and people started flooding into gold and silver and they were scared, and when people are scared, when there's fear, gold and silver tend to rise in price because that's what people tend to flood into safe investments like that, things that are solid assets, precious metals, and so on. And so, and also recently we've seen the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. He wrote a letter to his shareholders in which he said, quote, "Some things never change. There will be another crisis, and its impact will be felt by the financial market." This was in a letter he sent to his shareholders. So obviously he's anticipating something, and stockpiling all this silver would make sense if a crisis was coming. And you know, my wife and I, we love silver. It's something that I've recommended for a long time, even though I warned people. I said it's going to go on a roller coaster ride. There's going to be huge ups and huge downs. And we've seen some of the downs recently. So people have got to be ready for a roller coaster ride. But in the long term, we think that it's going to go up tremendously. And apparently J.P. Morgan Chase believes the same thing.
Sure seems to be that way. Go ahead.
Now, what do you think of the stock market with these numbers that the stock market is sitting at, and how that influences the economic situation?
Yeah, I think the stock market is so bizarre because it's at this point it's completely divorced from economic reality, and of course that never last indefinitely, but right now it's continued for an extended period of time. We've seen this bubble, and sometimes bubbles go on, financial bubbles go on longer than people ever think they will, but eventually, sooner or later, they always burst. And so right now, by just about every measure you want to look at, the stock market is massively overvalued. In fact, in the old days, when I was an undergraduate, I was taught that a price-to-earnings ratio for a stock of more than 20 was really, really high. That was really, really good. Well, now we've got all these stocks that are being traded in the stock market that have a price-to-earnings ratio of greater than 100. And you look at General Electric, it has a price-to-earnings over 200, its trailing price-to-earnings ratio. So, people are just pouring money into these stocks at ridiculous prices. We've got the NASDAQ soaring to record highs, in which, some of these stocks on the NASDAQ, these tech stocks, have never earned a penny of profit, and yet they're supposedly worth billions of dollars. I think it's completely and totally ridiculous. But we're seeing margin debt. We've seen three great peaks in margin debt in modern American history. One was right before the dot-com bubble burst. The margin debt soared to unprecedented heights. In other words, people borrowed massive amounts of money to put into the stock market. It's peaked like crazy, then it burst. We saw another peak in 2007 and right before the financial crisis of 2008. Once again, margin soared to a tremendous peak. People borrowed tons of money to get in the stock market. Bubble burst, and it dropped off again. And now we've seen the exact same thing happen. People don't learn the lesson. Margin debt has peaked again to a tremendous height. People are borrowing tons of money to get in the stock market. And what's going to happen? Of course, the bubble's going to burst, and people are going to lose tons of money. It's just a matter of time.
We hear a lot of talk about, in the blogosphere and talk radio, about a bank holiday and how that might be a possibility of, if things were to go bad, that we would see a bank holiday kind of kick things off. Can you explain to us, for those of us who may not be aware listening, what a bank holiday is, what it would look like, and do you think it's actually a possibility that we would see something like that here in America?
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that can happen in a financial crisis, and it can take different forms and there can be different circumstances, but essentially it's similar to what we saw in Cyprus and what's rumored to be coming up in Greece here. We may get another example of this very quickly, where all of a sudden, the banks kind of shut down for a period of time. You can't get your money. You can't get your money out of the ATM. Your money is not available for you out of the bank. And then when the banks do reopen, sometimes there's a nasty surprise, like in Cyprus, when there's this haircut and all of a sudden, people had a certain amount of their money taken away if they had a certain amount in their accounts. So during a financial crisis in the United States, we could easily see a potential bank holiday or a bank shut down for a period of time, and you may not be able to get your money out of the bank. That's why one of the things I recommend for people is that they have at least some cash at home in the case of an emergency. In case you can't go to the ATM, you can't get your money out of the bank, you can take your money and go to the store and buy food for your family or whatever you need. Of course, don't keep all your cash at home. I'm a big believer in not having all of your eggs in one basket. But to keep some at home, I think, is a very wise thing to do. And so a lot of times people ask me, because I run the Economic Collapse blog, people are writing to me all the time, what are some common sense things we can do to get prepared for what's ahead? Well, actually, Today is the very first day that my new book that I co-authored with Barbara Fix is available on Amazon.com. Just today I learned it's available right now on Amazon.com. It's called Get Prepared Now, and it talks about the whys about what's coming, about the economic crisis, about why we should get prepared, but more importantly, it talks about the hows, practical things that people can do to get prepared for the coming crisis. And so it's called Get Prepared Now. It's available on Amazon.com, and there will be banners up on my website as soon as I can get them up. But the reason I wrote this is because I believe that this next major crisis, we're almost there. It's almost on top of us. And so if people are going to get prepared, if there's any time right now, I believe is the key time for people to get prepared.
And can you give us a few of those, maybe go into a few of the subjects you cover in the book and tell us a little bit about, we got about 4 minutes left. I'm assuming you're just staying here with us first hour, and want to be sure to give you time to give out your websites and whatnot. But beforehand, maybe you can give us a couple of those strategies that you cover in the book.
Yeah, we talk about what happens if the power grid goes down. We talk about practical steps for storing food, practical steps for storing water, steps for growing food. We talk about grid down cooking, heating, lighting, and sanitation. We talk about food storage how-tos. We talk about gardening during a long-term crisis. We talk about emergency first aid supplies. We talk about what happens if a pandemic comes. We talk about emergency 72-hour kits. We talk about bugging, relocation. We talk about, what if you want to move to another country. All those things are in Get Prepared Now, this new book, which has just been released on Amazon.com. I also have a brand new DVD that I've just released called The Economic Collapse, World War III, and the Death of America, which talks about what I believe is coming from right now up until World War III, and basically the destruction of this country and the roadmap of everything that comes in between. And you can find that on the economiccollapseblog.com, which is my primary website, or if you just go to Google and type in The Economic Collapse, it's the first result that comes up. If you go to my website, there's a banner for that new DVD right at the top of the right-hand column. And I talk about things I've never publicly talked about before. I reveal some things which are absolutely going to shock people, but I think now is the time to release these things, and it's from a Christian perspective. And I talk about some spiritual issues and some things that are really going to take some people by surprise. But it's called Economic Collapse, World War III, and the Death of America. It's the most comprehensive warning about what's coming to this country that I've ever come across. And so if people kind of want a really good idea of what's coming in the next, say, 5 years to this nation, that's the number one resource that I would point to.
Well, I'm going to have to get a couple copy of these and go through them and have you back on to discuss them.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back on with you guys anytime.
Well, I'll download a copy, see if I can't get a copy of the DVD, and get through it, and then I'll contact you back.
Yeah, and because we need to get the warning message out. I believe that we're on such a critical time. We've had this period of false stability. It's kind of lulled people into a false sense of security. A lot of preppers, I think for a while there, they stopped. They said, well, maybe everything is okay. Maybe everything's going to be just fine. Well, I believe that this period of false stability, I hope that it lasts for as long as possible, because I want things to be stable and normal too. No one should want the horrible things that are coming to actually come, because they are going to be horrible. I believe that what we're heading into is going to be the worst time in American history. I'm talking about worse than the Great Depression. I'm talking about worse than the Civil War. The worst times for America that we've ever seen, I believe, are coming. And in the DVD, I explain exactly why I believe that this is true. And like I said, I talk about things I've never publicly talked about before. What I have to say in this DVD is just going to shock a lot of people.
How much does it cost for our listeners?
Well, the DVD is available from the Prophecy Club. They're the ones that produced the DVD, and they're the ones that if people bought the Lindsey Williams DVDs. It's the same organization that produced them. It's $30 is the DVD, which is a lot less than what the Lindsey Williams DVDs were priced for. So, but they're available from the Prophecy Club. But if people aren't familiar with their organization, there's just a banner at the top of my website, which people can click. It'll take you right to the DVD.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to go check that out and see what you have to say. Sounds very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I thank you guys for having me on. I think you guys are doing such a great job with your radio show and warning people about what's coming. People are hungry for the truth, and we've seen that with the growth of your radio show. People are like, know that they're not getting the truth from the mainstream media. They're not getting accurate information. So people are hungry for news and information that's real, and that's why they're turning to radio shows like yours and to websites such as mine.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, as things get worse, they're going to continue. So, we see a certain amount of success, but unfortunately, it's a double-sided blade because it's coming on the heels of really some negative happenings to our people. But Michael Snyder of the Economic Collapse blog, thank you so much for joining us again. We'll talk with you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
All right, folks, stick with us. We'll be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to Liberty Brothers Radio Show.